Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. Donald Trump has said he's getting some good vibes from Russia about the possibility of a ceasefire in Ukraine. But getting good vibes and getting to a ceasefire deal are two separate things, especially at a time when the Russians have heightened their attacks and are cementing their dominant position on the ground. This week, Russia recaptured the key town of Sudzha in the Kursk region. And according to reports that are coming in, it has managed to almost completely surround the Ukrainian soldiers, who are heavily outgunned and outnumbered. In fact, some Ukrainians are even saying that Russia intensified its attacks on the Kursk region only after the United States suspended military and intelligence support for Ukraine, resulting in the Ukrainians suffering from serious reverses in the Kursk region. In August 2024, Ukraine had surprised everyone when in a lightning offensive, it managed to smash through the Russian defenses and captured large swathes of territory in Kursk. Volodymyr Zelensky had repeatedly asserted that the Ukrainians had captured Kursk so as to negotiate on fairer terms. But Kursk as a negotiating card has now slipped out of Ukrainian hands. So while Donald Trump pushes Ukraine to strike a deal with Russia for a ceasefire, the big question is this: how far into the future is the ceasefire? And what terms can the Ukrainians hope to get from the advancing Russian forces? On the 13th of March, the Russian state media put out these images. The key town of Sudzha in the Kursk region, which the Ukrainians had captured in August 2024, lay in complete ruins. But the flag that was now fluttering atop the main buildings that were still left standing was no longer Ukrainian. In an intensified attack that lasted for over a week, just when the Americans had suspended the flow of arms into Ukraine after the disastrous meeting between Zelensky and Donald Trump, Russia, using some of its best drone operators, staged wave after wave of attacks, decimating the Ukrainian defenses. According to reports, with no access to US intelligence, the blindsided Ukrainian defenders could barely make out from where they were hit. And according to the American president, a number of the Ukrainian soldiers have now been completely surrounded by the Russian forces.
Hopefully nothing will happen with that. I've asked them not to let anything happen, and I hope that nothing happens. But I feel that Russia is going to make a deal with us, I hope. We've spoken with President Putin, we've spoken with a lot of people, and Ukraine is waiting. I'm very concerned about the field. In the field, there's a very vulnerable group of Ukrainian soldiers right now that are actually surrounded. And that's not good, because we don't want them to die. Enough people have died. So we'll see what happens with regard to all of it. But I'm getting, from the standpoint about a ceasefire and ultimately a deal, some pretty good vibes coming out of Russia.
On the other side, Vladimir Putin, who recently met the American envoy Steve Witkoff in Moscow, said that the Ukrainian soldiers in Kursk had committed numerous crimes. But if they were to lay down their weapons and surrender, then their lives would be spared and they would be treated according to the norms of the international law.
I would like to say that we have read today's appeal by US President Mr. Trump to spare the lives of Ukrainian army servicemen, parts of which are blocked by Russian troops in the zone of the Ukrainian armed forces invasion of the Kursk region. In this regard, we draw attention to the fact that Ukrainian militants have committed numerous crimes against the civilian population in the invasion zone. These acts, as I have already said, are classified as terrorism by the Prosecutor General's Office of the Russian Federation.
The Ukrainian soldiers who are fighting on the front lines described their ordeal to be the most difficult time in the last 3 years of this war, constantly on the move and waiting for the weapons to defend the positions they hold. Volodymyr Zelensky's position too could not be more precarious. from the rude shock that he got during his meeting with Donald Trump at the Oval Office, where the Ukrainian president learned that the American flow of weapons could stop at any moment, Volodymyr Zelensky has now climbed down several notches. The contours of a deal are yet to be worked out, but in principle, Zelensky is now voicing support for the American proposal for a ceasefire.
Today has been all about diplomacy. A lot of negotiations that can bring peace closer. Now on the table is the American proposal for an unconditional ceasefire in the sky, at sea and on the front. Ukraine accepts this offer, and from here we can start a rapid process towards guaranteed security, towards the end of this war and towards a lasting peace.
Zelensky's options for a ceasefire look limited. The American support for Ukraine in this war is now conditional on Kiev towing Donald Trump's line. The American pullback from the defense of Ukraine has sent the European leaders into a tizzy. The likes of Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron are trying to cobble together what is being loosely called the coalition of the willing. The objective is to keep the pressure on Vladimir Putin during the ceasefire talks, but the doors are closing on Ukraine. Kiev appears to have no say on the terms of the deal. Kursk, which could have been used as a bargaining chip, has now slipped out of Ukrainian hands. And unless the mercurial and transactional Donald Trump has a change of heart or mind, the Ukraine war will only end with the dismemberment of Ukraine and with Europe's security calculus changed forever. At least 26 people, including 18 military personnel, were killed by the Baloch Liberation Army before at least 339 hostages were rescued from a passenger train that was hijacked by the separatists in the Balochistan province. Now, the Pakistani army has said that all 33 militants were killed in the two-day rescue operation that ended late on Wednesday. But this claim was refuted by the Baloch Liberation Army, which said on Thursday that it still had hostages and the standoff with the security forces was ongoing. The Baloch separatists initially claimed that 50 hostages had been executed instead of 26, the number that was quoted by the Pakistani army. After their deadline to exchange the 214 hostages for Baloch political prisoners expired on Friday, the separatists, blaming Pakistan's stubbornness, claimed to have executed all 214 hostages. The unprecedented train hijacking by the Baloch Liberation Army took place when the passenger train Jafar Express, bound for Peshawar, was passing through the tunnels near Sibi city. That's about 160 kilometers from Quetta. Our next report gets you the details.
For around 450 passengers on board the Jafar Express, which was travelling from Quetta, the provincial capital of Balochistan, and destined for Peshawar, the capital of the northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The notion of safe mode of transportation by trains lay shattered when the train was attacked by the Baloch Liberation Army. The separatists blew up a section of the tracks, forcing 9 coaches and the engine of Jafar Express train to stop partially inside a mountain tunnel, wherein they opened fire on the train, leading to a hijacking that lasted more than 30 hours. Reportedly, at least 100 of those on board the train were members of the security forces. In the past, the rebel group has attacked military camps, railway stations and trains, but it was the first time they managed to hijack a train. The militants threatened to kill hostages if their demands of releasing Baloch political prisoners was not met within 48 hours. Early Wednesday morning, some of the passengers managed to escape after being taken hostage by the gunmen.
They kept us hostage for the whole night. Around 5 in the morning, they wanted to relax because they had shot so many people overnight. Some of them are Punjabis and some Sirakis. They thought we would escape, as they earlier warned us that if we tried to escape, they would shoot us. Around 5 in the morning, we escaped and they intensively fired at us from behind.
Reportedly, women and elders were spared, but few unlucky ones were chosen and shot dead by the militants. Compounding the problem for authorities was no internet or mobile coverage in the remote area. Now, faced with such doomsday scenario, helicopters and hundreds of troops were deployed to rescue the hostages. Information related to the attack and subsequent rescue operation was tightly controlled throughout. The rescue operation was concluded on Wednesday with at least 339 hostages freed and all 33 militants being killed. The next day, Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif visited Quetta for a briefing on the security situation. He commended the country's security forces for successfully conducting the rescue operation and called for national unity to fight against terrorism.
Today, we have rescued innocent Pakistanis from the clutches of these ruthless beasts. But God forbid, Pakistan cannot afford to undergo any such incident again. For that, every one of us will have to play their role. Our armed forces will be able to crush these terrorists with full valor and force as soon as possible if we are united.
Oil and mineral-rich Balochistan is Pakistan's largest province by territory, but the smallest in terms of population. Despite being blessed with mineral resources and vast reserves of natural gas, the province has remained the country's poorest, giving rise to a broader rebellion. Most prominent of these rebel groups in southwestern Balochistan province is the Baloch Liberation Army. The decades-old rebel movement blames the Pakistani government of neglecting its residents and unfair distribution of resources, with Baloch Liberation Army frequently targeting Pakistani security forces and ethnic groups from outside the province. Insecurity and fear is a recurring theme in conversations here.
When we embark on a journey, it is always uncertain and unsafe. Traveling on highways is risky, and the buses we travel in can be stopped at any time. We once considered trains a safe mode of transportation, but unfortunately, we are no longer safe even on trains.
In my opinion, the people of Balochistan have always lived in fear, but unfortunately, this fear has now spread to the hearts of people in other provinces as well. They are now hesitant to travel to Balochistan by road or train as it has become a daunting and risky task.
The Pakistan security forces have found the going tough in battling the deadly decades-long insurgency by Baloch separatists. Since 2006, the Baloch Liberation Army has been banned by both Pakistan and the United States, which designates it as a terrorist organization. Though the Pakistan Army has been particularly active in the province, killing 225 insurgents last year alone. But this unprecedented train hijacking with over 100 security personnel on board is bound to raise some question marks regarding the adequacy of security on board the Jafar Express. Impoverished Balochistan, battling a decades-long insurgency, remains one of the biggest pressure points for Islamabad.
On the 13th of March, the Israeli military carried out an airstrike on a residential building in the outskirts of the Syrian capital Damascus. According to the British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, at least one person was killed in this Israeli airstrike. The Israeli military alleged that the building was actually a command center of the Palestinian militant faction Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which had been used to plan and direct attacks against Israel. Furthermore, the Israeli military has vowed to respond forcefully to the presence of any Palestinian factions inside Syria. In response, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad has said that this Israeli strike will not intimidate the movement. On Tuesday as well, the Israeli military had said that its warplanes had struck southern Syria overnight, targeting Syria's air defense systems and other military sites. Our next report gets you the details.
This is the footage released by the Israeli army of what it says is an airstrike on the edge of Damascus, targeting a command center belonging to the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group. Tel Aviv claims Islamic Jihad fought alongside Hamas against Israel in Gaza before a fragile truce began in January. Syria's official news agency, Sana, reported that apart from one person killed, 3 civilians were wounded in the airstrike, including one woman who is believed to be in critical condition. following the strike. The facade of the three-story building was completely destroyed. As smoke billowed and ambulance sirens wailed, residents gathered at the site of the strike. Following the Israeli military action, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to carry out more such strikes if needed, not just in Syria, but also in Lebanon.
This morning, we attacked an Islamic Jihad headquarters in the heart of Damascus. We did this because we have a clear policy. Whoever attacks us or plans to attack us, we attack them. And this applies not only in Syria, it applies everywhere. It applies also in Lebanon. Just this past week, we killed 5 Hezbollah operatives because they violated the agreement, and we are enforcing this agreement with great firmness.
Israeli Defense Minister, while confirming that the Israeli Air Force had conducted an airstrike in Damascus, adopted a tough stance and threatened that there will be no immunity for Islamic terrorism against Israel. Palestinian Islamic Jihad, on its part, admitted that the targeted building belonged to the group, but had been closed for 5 years and nobody from the movement frequented there. Condemning the aggression and calling it an attack on the Syrian people, Islamic Jihad's representative in Syria, Ismail Sindawi, was of the opinion that Tel Aviv was just sending a message.
It is totally a civilian neighborhood. There are no military bases as the Israeli occupation claims. Also, there are no offices of the Islamic Jihad movement in the Mashru Duma neighborhood. This was a house of the Secretary General of Islamic Jihad and it has been closed for 5 years and none of the Islamic Jihad cadres frequented it. This is a message by the Israeli occupation that it wants to pressure the Islamic Jihad movement. It wants to pressure the negotiators in order for them to offer compromises in the prisoners' files.
Since former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's overthrow last December, Israel has carried out hundreds of airstrikes in Syria and deployed troops to buffer zones on the strategic Golan Heights. Early Tuesday, Israeli warplanes had struck the southern province of Daraa, targeting air defense systems and other military sites in order to eliminate what Tel Aviv perceives as future threats. Interestingly, the strike in Damascus came just before Syria's interim president Ahmed al-Sharaa hailed the start of a new history for his country. He signed a temporary constitution that will be in force for a 5-year transitional period and laid out rights for women and freedom of expression. The big question is, considering Israel has demanded complete demilitarization of southern Syria, will it accept the presence of the forces of the new Islamist-led government near its territory?
At least 7 people were killed in a deadly 24-hour-long siege of a popular hotel in central Somalia by the Al-Shabab militants. The 24-hour siege, which ended on Wednesday morning, began with a car bomb explosion, followed by the Al-Shabab gunmen storming the hotel in the city of Beledweyne. The Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabab claims that it killed about 20 people, including government officials and leaders of a pro-government militia in the attack. The Somalian federal government, without confirming the death toll, has said that all attackers had been neutralized. So why has the Somali government failed in putting a lid on the insurgency by the Islamist militant group Al-Shabab, who've been fighting to topple Somalia's central government to establish their own rule based on their own narrow interpretation of the Sharia law? Our next report gets you the details.
The central Somali city of Beledweyne, about 335 kilometers north of the capital Mogadishu, is a key strategic location in the campaign against Islamist militant group Al-Shabab. On the 11th of March, politicians, security officials and traditional elders were having a meeting here at the Cairo Hotel to discuss plans for an offensive against Al-Shabab in central Somalia. as the government officials and tribal elders deliberated action against the militant outfit. The Al-Shabab gunmen detonated a car bomb before storming and laying siege to the hotel. As government security forces and Al-Shabab gunmen exchanged fire, parts of the hotel was reduced to rubble.
They first attacked us with a vehicle laden with explosives. Since I was among those on duty during the initial attack, I also fought against the assailants. We truly fought to the end, but there were also suicide attackers. One of them detonated himself inside, resulting in the highest number of casualties.
The mayor of Beledweyne district, Omar Osman Kalaso, said 7 people had been killed in the attack, though eyewitnesses' accounts put the death toll significantly higher. The number of people wounded in the attack also remains unclear, though plans were afoot to organize planes to fly victims to Mogadishu for treatment. The militant group Al-Shabab first emerged in response to neighboring Ethiopia's invasion of Somalia in 2006. It frequently carries out bombings and assaults targeting government officials and military personnel in the Horn of Africa nation. Its success can be gauged by the fact that they have been able to create and maintain a parallel government in a de facto state within Somalia's official borders. Besides providing security for civilians under its rule, they operate an independent judiciary and collect somewhere between $100 million and $150 million in taxes annually. This latest attack is yet another reminder that, despite sustained military operations by government troops and the African Union peacekeepers, the Al-Shabaab militants remain a big threat in the Federal Republic of Somalia.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. And if you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.